Dragons of Arandor, Volume 1, Knights and Kings, from Allan J. Stark. Chapter 1, 2nd Sylvan 3003 Age of the Crowns. Zora hated looking after her father's 20 goats. The stubborn animals almost drove her crazy. The situation was made worse by the fact that she had to lead the goats to the meadows that nestled against the mountainsides far above the village. Only there was the grey grass, which apparently tasted good to the animals and gave their meat a spicy note, making it particularly desirable to the inhabitants along the north coast. Zora spent the last days of summer in a small hut at the top of the mountain, about 3 hours' walk from Schwarzfels, the coastal village of Braska, where she had grown up. Zora was now 16. She had already spent 4 summers alone in the hut, looking after the smelly goats. She had no idea how much longer her father would ask her to do this hard and dreary work. She missed the summer parties of her early childhood, her friends, less her 2 older sisters who were favored by her father. Perhaps he did so because they were prettier. Unlike her 2 flaxen-haired sisters, Zora's head was adorned with thick black hair. Her face was broader and did not have the delicate features of the 2 who were considered the village beauties, which they undoubtedly were. Freckles dotted Zora's cheeks, and her nose seemed a little too big. Her mother Danya's bright blue eyes were the only thing she had in common with her sisters. Zora hated her father Rowan even more than the goats. The eldest of Braska, a hard, coarse man shaped by life and work as a fisherman on the North Sea. He wanted her out of his sight. She didn't imagine that, she knew it. Her presence seemed repugnant to him. He treated her roughly, found fault with everything she did, and called her names. Bitterness, anger, and hatred gradually crept into her heart, and even though they tried to persuade her that hating her own father was a sin, as the dolmen, the monks of the North Fire, taught her, she felt no remorse. Wasn't a father also obliged to love all his children, or did the many gods of the peoples of Arandor make a difference? A child was born without the opportunity to choose its parents. Parents, on the other hand, made a decision whether to have children or not. In Barros, parents killed their firstborn children shortly after birth. Did the gods allow fathers and mothers to behave like monsters? Did the gods demand that the children accept the arbitrariness of their parents without harboring resentment? Zora tried to understand and control her feelings, her anger at the gods and the humans they had created, or at Avenir, the primordial dragon who had created the world, humans, animals, and plants from his fiery breath, as the monks of the Northern Fire said. As hard as she tried, she saw no sense in the laws and teachings of the dolmen who proclaimed the will of the creators in the villages around the Atra mountains, of which there were apparently countless. Zora found no comfort in their words. When she returned to the village with the goats in late fall, where the animals were kept in a large stable and Zora had a small room under the roof to herself, she felt even more alone than here on the mountain. Zora thought all this was her fate, prepared for her by the gods or by Avenir. The gods seemed to her like strict parents who decided the happiness and unhappiness of their children. Perhaps that was why these overpowering beings were more inclined towards fathers and mothers than their offspring. When she returned to the present from her gloomy thoughts, she noticed that Paki, a red and white spotted goat, was missing. Zora was annoyed at her carelessness. She had never lost an animal before. On the contrary, she had already chased away a pack of wolves twice, and once even a bear. She could never forgive herself if she lost even one of the animals through her carelessness. The stubborn Paki, however, liked to keep her distance from the herd, which always stayed close to Zora. And she loved the bird herbage that grew further up the hill. Zora was sure she would find the goat behind the rocks above her. She climbed up the only path between the grey boulders, but couldn't find Paki there. There was a strip of untouched grass below a jagged rock face. It ended after about 100 steps on a steep slope. Zora feared Paki might have fallen and hurried towards the cliff. Her eyes searched the depths, but found no carcass crushed on the rocks. Perplexed, she looked around. Where could the stupid animal have disappeared to? She was still puzzling over this when she heard a distant bleating that seemed to be coming from inside the rock face. Zora moved closer to the rock and pushed aside a strand of ivy dangling in a vertical crevice. A narrow cave entrance appeared into which Paki must have slipped. "Damn cattle," Zora hissed and squeezed through the gap. The narrow passageway widened, and after just a few steps, Zora was able to stand upright. Cool darkness greeted her in the cave. It was deathly quiet, as if the world around her had suddenly disappeared with the eternal whisper of the wind. "Paki?" Zora called into the gloom, and from deep inside the cave came the bleating of the goat in reply. Zora pulled a small glass tube from her belt pouch and shook the beetles inside it. The insects flew furiously against the glass with their glowing abdomens. They flared up so brightly that Zora was almost blinded. A glow of light spread through the grotto as if a blue sun had suddenly risen in the darkness. "Paki!" Zora's voice pierced the darkness again. The goat answered again with its bleating. It sounded far away. "Damn you!" the girl screamed. "You can go moldy down there for all I care." The goat bleated again, but it sounded pathetic, as if it was injured or afraid. Zora reluctantly descended further into the depths. She was more annoyed with Paki than filled with pity, but she was even more annoyed with herself. If she had indulged less in self-pity, none of this would have happened. Zora climbed over boulders, slid down a steep rock face, and wondered at the red glow of light coming from further down the cave. Zora hesitated for a moment and wondered whether it wouldn't be wiser to turn back. She looked up and could just see the tiny bit of sky shimmering through the crack in the rock through which she had entered the mountain. Zora was afraid that she might get lost down here, break a leg, or be eaten by the Gygrils, the mountain goblins that sucked the blood of humans and left them as will-less shells. But those were old wives' tales, Zora reminded herself as she descended further. Nevertheless, doubts remained as to whether there was some truth in the stories about the gruesome creatures under the mountains. The cave changed the further Zora advanced into the mountain. It became wider and higher. Every step Zora took was echoed back from the rocks, and before Zora knew it, she was standing in a wide rock hall with stalactites hanging from the ceiling. They glistened damply in the light of a fiery lava stream that flowed as a narrow rivulet at the far end of the grotto. Paki stood next to a large boulder and stared at Zora, grumbling softly. "Now I have to see how I can get you up there again." Zora hissed at the animal and approached it cautiously. "Just stay right there. Got it?" When Zora grabbed the little goat by its collar to prevent it from escaping again, she flinched in horror. What she had thought was a massive rock was in fact the carcass of a dragon. In the flickering light of the stream of fire, Zora recognized a huge skull whose empty eye sockets seemed to stare back at her. The monster's snarling head was covered in dried, scaly skin. The red light of the lava dancing on the dragon mummy gave the beast something alive that captivated Zora and prevented her from running away. She wondered how long the dead monster had been lying here. 100 years, 1,000 years. Where had it come from? Zora circled the dragon and wondered at its strange posture. Curled up as if it had fallen asleep peacefully, the tip of its tail under its chin, and a holy wing stretched over its body as if it were trying to protect something. Zora's curiosity got the better of her, and she overcame her disgust to touch the dead beast. Zora pushed the wing aside as far as she could. She shone the beetle lamp into the shadow and recognized 3 elongated eggs, each the size of a gourd. Paki grumbled as if she wanted to apologize for the little excursion and return to daylight. Zora gave the red and white spotted animal a friendly look. "You've been good for more than just ending up on a plate." Zora picked up one of the eggs. It was heavy, like an iron ingot from the village smithy, yet it looked fragile and delicate. She carefully placed it in the pocket of her apron and made her way back with Paki, who she had to pull behind her by her collar. In the meantime, night had fallen. Zora had brought the 3 dragon eggs from the cave to her hut, which had been more time-consuming than it had seemed at first. The eggs, which now lay on the small table, shone in the light of the tallow candle like polished metal, each in a different color. One seemed to be made of pure gold, the second of silver, and the third shimmered a rich copper red. The surfaces looked as if someone had engraved fine patterns into them. She saw curved lines on which the candlelight glittered. Zora wondered if they were still alive. As she was so excited that she couldn't sleep anyway, she took the silver egg, made her way back to the cave, and entered the interior of the mountain. "Maybe you will become a mother after all," said Zora as she walked past the dragon mummy after the arduous descent. The shimmering white row of teeth in the dragon's mouth gleamed in the light of the molten rock. It seemed to Zora as if the dead beast was grinning at her. The heat emitted by the narrow lava stream was so intense that it seemed impossible for Zora to get closer than 3 steps. She had to abandon her plan to lay the egg in the hot, molten rock. It had been too risky an idea anyway, as it could easily be washed away and lost. Zora looked around for a more suitable place for her project and went to the spot where the stream of fire flowed out of the cave wall. The rock here radiated a heat that reminded her of an open oven. Zora carefully placed the egg down and quickly took a few steps back. The soles of her leather boots were smoking. Zora sat down on a stone some distance away and took them off. She carefully rubbed her aching feet and stared at the egg, lost in thought. "What do baby dragons eat?" she thought. "Goats? And do they drink milk or water?" The thought that she had just done something stupid flitted through her mind. "First do, then see," her grandfather had always said, and at the moment it seemed like the wisdom of a scholar.